1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi warriors, welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host Ingrid. I have brought you multiple stories involving domestic violence. Unfortunately, some who have escaped the trauma may be left with a sense of hopelessness. The abuse may continue past the end of the relationship, especially when children are involved. Throughout her lifelong struggle with domestic abuse from her mother into later romantic relationships, Kathy wondered why this kept happening to her. Listen as she shares what years of research and self-reflection have helped her learn about domestic violence victims.
I realised after my last journey through abuse, it went to court and he lied and there was no justice. And that was probably my lowest point in all the abuse that I'd been throughout my life. To see that there was no accountability for his actions was just devastating. I then took the opportunity to reflect on my life and to try and work out how I kept ending up in these situations. Like, what was it that kept me attracting these people? Now, there were obvious reasons, like with my mother, who was my first abuser. I realised probably in my 30s that she was mentally unwell. So that was a factor for the abuse. She was definitely narcissistic, and she had multiple personality disorder. She was very aggressive and very violent. So I understood her in that she couldn't control that behaviour. It took me until my 30s, but I realised that she needed help. And until she got help, I wasn't going to have a relationship with her anymore. My physical abuser, it was, don't get me wrong, there was still verbal abuse there, but that was so in my face. You know, I knew when I was going to cop it because there were triggers, there were signs that he would just lose it and I would end up on the end of, his fist or whatever. So I could predict that. And certainly after that relationship, I could spot someone who was physically abusive a mile away. Certain mannerisms, certain ways that they spoke, I just went, whoa, okay, now I see that and I'll steer clear of that. With the last relationship, it was more sneaky and I did not understand the power of psychological abuse, coercive control, and emotional abuse. I just didn't realise that that was even a factor. And that for me played out, that's where my learning started to take place. I really started to look at the characteristics of these people that I'd been in relationships with. So I wanted to know why I kept attracting them. And it was quite simple, really. At the end of the day, I realised attracting them because I didn't understand the indicators for that abuse. I accepted my mother's behaviour because she was my mother, and I thought I wanted a relationship with her more than I wanted anything. So I accepted that for way too long. My second relationship, I stayed in that because my need to have a family overrode my own self-value. And my third relationship, I simply stayed in it because I didn't understand what it was. And I kept fighting to get that hot, because when it was good, it was really good. And I just believed that it would stay that way. So I kept fighting for that. And I stayed in that for way too long because I had this belief. And I realised through my study, I actually healed myself, which was so powerful. Looking at the reasons why I attracted these people. Firstly, they need somebody who is extremely forgiving. So you have to be someone who is, it sounds terrible, but easily manipulated. Because of your very giving, loving, forgiving nature, they feel like they can manipulate you into any situation. They can excuse any situation and you will accept it until, of course, you don't. And then it's all your fault, you know. So, I mean, that you play a role in this is really, really hard. But you do, in that you deserve somebody who is as equally loving, giving, caring as you are. And if you don't have that, if you start excusing those red flags in the beginning, it will just escalate and you will keep attracting that person. Will just, their behavior will get more and more and more. And that goes for any relationship. That goes for friendships, it goes for work colleagues, family, and, you know, personal relationships. There, you can have an abuser in any given situation. So understanding that you and your boundaries play a role in this, because if you, I'm not saying that you deserve it, not by any means. Nobody deserves to be abused or taken advantage of, but this person saw your ability to love as a weakness. They saw you as somebody easy to control and manipulate and dominate, and that's what they did. I think we accept these situations for a lot of reasons. I've spoken to a lot of domestic violence victims, and it ranges from I need to stay because when I go, that person will abuse. When my children visit, they will be abused, so they stay to protect their children. People stay, like my own reasons, because I wanted that relationship, or I valued that nucleus more than I did myself. People stay because of pets. You know, I know one lady had 12 horses and she said, what do I do? Where do I go? I can't go anywhere. Don't tell me to go. Don't tell me to leave, because my life, you know, so I just can't do it. People stay for many, many, many different reasons. And unless you've walked in their shoes, you won't understand why they stay. But I can tell you that if we can stop people from getting into those relationships in the first place, that is the key. And to do that, I think we need to work on our own self. We need to work on our own boundaries. And to start off with, you really need to understand who you are. So what are your highest core values? If you choose 3 of your highest core values, you want to find that the person that you're with has the same, because your values drive your behaviour. They drive who you are inside. And if your highest value is commitment and this person never wants to get married, I mean, sure, they might change their mind one day, but why are you wasting your time when there's the right person out there who definitely wants commitment? You know, we need to be on the same page as our partner with our values. That's the first thing that you need to look for. And then you need to have a look at, don't dismiss the red flags. And if the red flags come in, If they're really good at hiding it and they come in 6, 7 years into the relationship when you're settled, you know, you've bought a house, you have a couple of children, and all of a sudden you've woken up with a monster who's just been able to keep it, they're going to want to stay. And that's why they do it. Some of them, that's why they do it. That's even then, that's when you need to have your boundaries. That's when you need to say, no, you have a choice in this. If you're going to treat me this way, I'm not going to put up with it. So now I'm going to put it back on you, change your behaviour, or let them go and grow. Abusers will behave in very different ways. They're not all the same. They're not all painted with the same brush. Like, you will have somebody who is outright nasty. Like, you meet them and they're talking to their partner like absolute garbage. And I don't discriminate between male and female either. There are some really nasty women out there who keep their children from the father and then say that it's the father's problem, and these children grow up without their dad because this person is just cruel. For want of a better word, they use the children as pawns. You know, I honestly think recognising those red flags, knowing what they are, knowing what emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and coercive control, knowing those indicators and being very aware of it. I probably swung the other way, where I saw everyone in this light of, oh, you know, I can see some emotional abuse there. And I became really quite judgy. Thankfully, I've swung back into the middle now, and I realise that there are people out there that are operating through their own experiences that don't have the capacity to meet you at the same level, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that they won't. That's not abuse. The red flags that you have to view them, see them for what they are, and then act on it. But also be prepared that some people make mistakes and they can change that behaviour. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned, is that an abuser will not change. They'll tell you they're going to change, but they will come back and they will do that behaviour in a different way. So say if they're financially abusive, when you meet them, you know, you might just think they're, excuse my language, but think they're a tight ass, you know, but in actual fact they're quite financially controlling, and it gets into your relationship where it affects what you do. You might be able to say to them, you know, this is going to destroy our relationship, so it needs to change. And they go, okay, I can change. And all of a sudden you see that they're letting go and they're being less financially abusive. But then they start being verbally abusive. So an abuser will often switch areas to keep you off guard, to keep you guessing what they're doing. It's all, sometimes it's just this game that they play, and you are so confused, and confusion is actually a sign that you are being abused. If you're confused in your relationship, if you don't understand why they're talking to you this way, why they're upset, why you can never please them, if you have confusion, that is definitely an indicator that you are in an abusive situation. I think we need to teach our children red flags. I think we need to teach our children what their core values are. We need for them to have a very healthy, supportive lifestyle of themselves, so that they attract to them a person that is going to love them the way that they deserve. Often we will attract people, if we have really strong, firm boundaries, we won't attract an abuser. We might for a minute, but we will quickly see it and our energy will just be like, go away, and they won't come any closer. I've found that I just don't have that anymore. Like, I don't have it. I'll see them and I'll quickly think, yeah, I don't want anything to do with you, and I'll remove myself from that situation. That doesn't mean that I won't give it a bit more time. I went through and I actually learnt and the different types of narcissists that are out there, which I never knew. That was a huge eye-opener for me to see the different types of people. Like, one of them is very outgoing, like really outgoing, so the life of the party, and love bombs you, all the things that women think, oh, this person just absolutely adores me, they put me on this pedestal. But one of the indicators with them is that they can't have deep and meaningful conversations. So if you ever get into, and life will do this to you, you'll get into troubled times, this person can't be there for you. They just can't be completely there for you. Or they'll switch and they'll become nasty, so that they can't sustain that love bombing, because that's exactly what it is. It's love bombing. It's not love at first sight, which I do believe in, to be honest. But the love bombing it's not a sustainable behaviour. So they'll do it for as long as until they get you, and then the phone calls will stop, or the gifts will stop, or even the nice way they speak to you will stop. So understanding that abusers will use different methods, and knowing all of those methods will keep you aware of if you're attracting the wrong person into your life. So I do a little presentation where I go through, what the definition of an abuser is, what types of people make up an abusive relationship. So you can have two narcissists in a relationship. That will be explosive. I've actually seen it. They just bounce off each other, and it's like, whoa, why are you guys even, but they're happy being miserable together. So, that's their choice. Do you think an abuser can change? Well, I do think that an abuser can change, but it has to be, they have to sustain the change. I've seen somebody do it, and I've also seen people who just cannot and will never change. But they have to sustain that change for themselves, and they have to consistently not do it. So if you're with somebody who's an alcoholic, for example, and they drink because they've had a lot of tragedy and they numb themselves, they can't stand it anymore, so they just keep drinking. And you say to them, this relationship is going to finish if you don't stop drinking, because, it's affecting us. And that person stops. So they're abusive while they're drinking, but then all of a sudden they stop and they change that behaviour. That can actually happen. But then there are people that are born narcissistic. Well, the jury's out whether they're born narcissistic or something happens and they shut down. I don't really know how they become narcissistic. What's the word? I don't really care how they become narcissistic. I just see them as people that are out to, the world owes them something. In a perfect world, we would have an island where we could just put all these narcissistic people and say, go on, fight to be the leader, fight to be the top one, treat each other the way that you want to, but yeah, leave us alone. I also do like what role we play, as I said before, with our boundaries and being this overly loving, overly giving, overly forgiving person. With the right person, there's nothing wrong with that if they're giving you the same. I don't mean that they have to be the same as you, but it has to be reciprocated. I go through what are red and green flags when you're dating, and I also have a red and green flag quiz. And I've had people that have had all green flags. And I've had people that have had a couple of green. And I'm like, well, that's, what you need to work on. And, you can see the area within your relationship that needs some work. And all relationships go through hard times. It doesn't matter how good they are. They all have ups and downs because that's just life. But understanding whether it's abusive or not really, really helps. And whether or not you can accept what those red flags are, if it's a deal breaker for you, because we all have our own deal breakers. We all have our different things that we will accept. Some people will never, ever, ever accept somebody cheating, whereas other people are happy to introduce other people into their relationships. So we're all different. And I think that we need to take that into account as well when we're looking into relationships. And then I've got, how do you help yourself or someone to leave safely? I truly believe that we can, if we educate our children around the areas of abuse and what abuse looks like and what a healthy relationship looks like, that's where we really need to start. That's where we need to change the mindset of beautiful, loving people and what they deserve and who they need to be with. We often, I realise that an empath is drawn to a narcissist because we have a deep desire instinctually to help people, to fix them. And we see in them what's missing and we think that we can help. And that is just, I look at that now, and I think, why do I want somebody I need to fix? No, I don't. I don't need anybody that I need to fix. I want somebody that will come to me with their A game and I will come to them with my A game. And that doesn't mean physically, like I suffer terribly at the moment from headaches, but I still know that I'm enough to have somebody in my life that will bring their A game, and I have a lot to give someone. So that, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant. I don't mean for it to, but I just think that we all have a lot to give people, and give it to the right person. Give it to somebody that will respect it, cherish it, and love it. Because you only get one heart, and you need someone who's going to look after that. I mentioned that my mother was extremely violent, that she was extremely abusive. Yes, she was violent. She was abusive to my father. From a very young age, I can remember them fighting, and they both end up with black eyes. And my father said to me recently how ashamed he was that he actually hit a woman. My father's a very honourable man. And he said, I've never hit a woman since. And I said to him, Dad, have you heard of reactive abuse? It's like, he said, I would hit her when she'd hit me. I said, do you think that maybe that was you protecting yourself? Like, I think people can push you to a point past what you believe that you are capable of. And I think he was a classic example of, should he have walked away? Absolutely. Should he have hit her back? No, he shouldn't have. But did she push him to a point where he lost himself? I believe so. And you'd have to know my mother to know what that was like, because it was extremely, extremely toxic that she would do that. I don't by any means advocate men hitting women, because I think we are the smaller sex. But I do know that with reactive abuse, you can do things that you would never normally do. Like, I know that in one of my relationships, I would slam a door and swear, and call him names to shut it down. Now, I don't speak to anyone like that. Well, I do, obviously, but that was the only circumstance that I've ever spoken to anyone like that. And it took me a long time to forgive myself for that. I just thought that I was the nutty one, that I was the issue in the relationship. It's crazy how they can push people to a point where you do and say things that you normally wouldn't. And being able to forgive yourself for that and realising it was just part of it. I mean, I've known of abusers that drink drive, and they've gotten their partner, who would never drink drive, to drive them home when they've had too many to drink. And then it's their way of saying, see, you're as bad as I am. So that they can get you on that level playing field. So reactive abuse is a real thing that they will use against you to make you feel like you are just as bad as they are. But it is just reactive abuse. It's not you being abusive. You need to look at your other relationships and see whether you like that in any others as well. So, I mean, as I said before, I actually healed myself from doing all of this research and knowing the whole circle of abuse and what's in it. And people present themselves differently in that abusive arena, and they can be abusive in many different ways on any given day. And it's just knowing what you've got in front of you. So, yeah, I'm very proud of what I've created from what I've been through, and knowing those red and green flags will certainly help anyone to be able to navigate their relationship, to see what it's like, and see they're just basic questions that, when you look at it, you'll be able to see if that person is, it's a series of 50 questions, 52, sorry, and by the end of it, you'll see if you've got a balanced relationship or not. Yes, well, I had somebody say to me, it makes me look at myself too, what I'm doing in this relationship. So it not only do you look at the person that you're with, but you look at your own behaviour as well. Definitely.
Yes, and I have I have a friend who just recently reached out to me, and she had been in a previously verbally, emotionally, financially abusive relationship. And she just messaged me and she said, "You're never going to believe it. I just broke up with another one. I got into it again." She's very intelligent. She's been through therapy. She actually knew this individual's ex from years ago who had described all of this, and she didn't believe that ex at the time. And I said, don't beat yourself up. They're very, they know what they're doing. And yes. And I said, although you're coming from experience and therapy and a lot of self-evaluation and a lot of self-reflection, and you think, I will never put up with that again, at the same respect, I think those of us who have been through this trauma are also wanting to prove, but I can find, I'm capable of loving again, and I can find that person who is supposed to love me the way they're supposed to love me. And you may, like you said, overlook some of these red flags, or even perhaps compare it to, well, this guy or girl or whomever is not doing things as badly as the previous partner, so maybe it's not that big of a red flag.
I think in your friend's case, what I would be looking at is that she recognised it in the second go, and the more we do that, the better we become at realising, hey, no, I'm just not doing this. Will I attract abusers again? Absolutely. They're everywhere. But they're not going to stay in my field for long, because I have too much self-respect to allow that to happen. anymore. And I think that's the difference. You can want, and we all deserve, I don't believe anyone is meant to be on this planet alone. That's just my opinion. And we all deserve healthy, loving relationships. And I think I'm not going to stop until I find that person. And it's not going to be perfect. I mean, no relationship is perfect, but there will be no abuse. That's the difference.
And yes, and that's the big difference. And like you said, as long as that other person is reciprocating. So if you feel that, oh, this new partner did not communicate well with me, that's a red flag. Or am I being too judgy, or what is it? But if you're able to communicate with that individual and say, this isn't working for me, and they think, oh my gosh, I didn't even recognize I was doing that, let me fix that. And as long as you're working together, then it's okay.
Let me fix that. That is such a powerful statement. Somebody who owns their behavior, like, for example, there are people out there that talk over the top of each other, and they're happy to do that. They're in a family, they grew up with that. But for other people, that might be seen as a red flag. Like if you say to them, like, I feel like I'm not talk over the top of me, can you change that? And they go, oh my goodness, they don't have to do it that way, but they go, yes, I'll certainly try. They're not being abusive. It's a habit that they have. But we can certainly see it as a red flag, because a red flag is actually anything that really upsets you. And the difference is if you say to them, I don't like it when you put me down in a joking way. Maybe you've had a lot of that and you don't like it. And this person changes that behaviour, then you've got yourself somebody who's not abusive. But so that's where the differences come in, and being able to find someone who you can communicate with and you can both grow together. That's definitely the way to go. But good on your friend for actually seeing that the second time round. I mean, we can kick ourselves till the cows come home and go, oh God, I've done it again. Fortunately, at the moment, domestic violence victims recognise it from what they've been through. And we've all been through different trauma and we've all had different triggers. I want to make it that you recognise it before you have to go through that. And this is where our children come in, teaching them what a healthy, loving relationship looks like as opposed to what it doesn't.
Absolutely, because it is difficult. Once you are in it, it is difficult for all the variety of reasons to get out. And you even mentioned at the beginning, even when you are able to remove yourself from that situation safely and your family or whomever else could be involved, there is often a lack of justice. And there's, the repercussions for the abuser. It doesn't match it. Rarely, I will say there have been instances where it may have, but it rarely matches what they've done.
Absolutely. Like, I am gobsmacked at what they get away with. It is so criminal that the victim needs to prove that the abuser has done this. To me, you have gone through abuse. Obviously, the courts need the proof, but we need to get better at being able to hold people accountable. We need to be able to get rid of that he said, she said abuse, because they're bringing in these coercive control laws, which in the UK bring up to 14 years in jail. But you have to be able to prove it. And this is where it gets really, really hard. I mean, they can put a death threat on your computer, but prove they did it. All they have to do is say, no, I didn't. It's in your home. You might be still in the house with them. It's just ridiculous. I mean, they have probable cause, but sometimes it's mind-blowing what they get away with and how deceitful they can be around other people. One of the best things that I would tell people is don't hide who that person is. Don't protect them, because at the end of the day, if you've made them out to be this really nice person because you don't want to air your laundry, and I get that, that's what people see, and that's what people will judge them on, and they will think then you have to fight justice for people to see who that person really is. So not only have you been abused, but they're supporting the abuser. You know, it's really, we really need to get better somehow at doing that. This is what I mean by some abusers can change. If both parents can put their differences aside and put the children first, and the rules are, you don't talk to mummy like that, you don't talk to daddy like that, we are respectful around our children, it can work. But I think in the best interest of the children, if they can do it amicably, and some of the things that they have here in Australia now, they have a forum that has a mediator on it. So you can go onto this, you can do all your chatting through a mediator, which I think is fantastic because it stops the games. I still see parents that still manipulate the situation just to, stir the other parent, and it's wrong. The games they play is just ridiculous. There's no need for it. There are some cases where I think the abuse is so bad that the other parent shouldn't be allowed to see the children, just because of the way that they're manipulating the other. They're using their children as pawns in that situation. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes they can do it and other times they can't. And this is where you will see that abuser that can't change, they're going to carry that abuse on through the children. The abuser that can change, they're the ones that will be amicable about it. So it's just recognising that person and the games that they play, and knowing, that if somebody's playing games during your relationship, they're going to keep playing them no matter what. And that's extremely hard. It's so hard to raise children in that environment, because the other spin-off from that too is children learn good and bad from their parents. So they're learning. If you're with somebody who, just say, they lie all the time and you end up splitting, your children will learn that is something that they can use to in that relationship. They don't see this is a person that loves them, or show it may be not a healthy love, but it's supposed to be somebody who cares for them. So they do see those behaviours and they do pick them up sometimes. And that's where, the other parent, as hard as they try, they need to make up for that lack as well. They will come in and say, you've got all great boundaries, great rules. Your children have, they're deeply loved with, you don't say yes to everything. They know that they can't have certain things, and you're firm but you're fair. And the other parent, it's just a circus. They can have whatever they want, whenever they want. You don't say no to them. So when they go to the parent that's firm, that's fair, they're going to act up because, hang on, I can get whatever I want over here, but I can't get what I want over here. See, to me, that in itself is abusive. It's that the child is not in the best environment there at all. It's hard. It's really hard. I don't know that we have the answer other than to not get in that relationship in the first place. And, you wouldn't take away your children for the world either. So I think looking at our future generations, being able to get them to get into healthy, loving relationships.
That's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying
Definitely.
to get into schools and give your presentation.
For sure. Yes, definitely.
So, just speaking of your presentation, if somebody were to want to see it, how would they get to that?
If you go onto a Facebook page called A Survivor's Suggestions, I often haven't done one for a while, but I do a presentation once a month. There's a red and green flag. You can do that for $10 just on your own. It's just recorded. Or if you want my whole presentation, just PM me and I'll set up one. I was trying to do one once a month where I would just sit with people, but I've sort of been a bit slack. Yeah, just go on to a survivor's suggestions and PM me.
Okay, and I have to double check, but I think you do have those links on the website for this podcast as well. So I think that people may be able to, if they can't recall the name of a survivor's suggestions, if they go to the website, I think they are able to click on that and get straight to your page. But I'll double check that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. When we come out of these relationships, I truly believe for myself that I won't attract it again. But, I'm human too. And abusers are really good at putting on a mask and fooling people. So having the knowledge of what abuse is and how it happens protects you from getting into that. But ultimately, it comes down to you and what you will accept and what you won't, what your deal breakers are. And if you're not being treated right, having the courage to go, I'm not doing this, I deserve better. And we all deserve to be loved unconditionally. And that's you and your partner deserves the same.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think this episode is so helpful because anyone who's been listening consistently, they hear these stories over and over again, some with a good or happier ending than others. But, there's the constant theme of how did this individual end up in this relationship in the first place? So I think this is so important to hear because, like you said, the best way to fight domestic violence is to prevent it in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so devastating being in a domestic violence situation. It is so hard on your soul and your heart and your self-confidence. You really do, and I hate the word, but you really do become a victim. And you have triggers then that will probably carry you through the rest of your life, things that will trigger you but not somebody else. So every domestic violence situation is different, what that abuser brings to the table. And we walk out of there, well, I know I certainly did, as a shell of who I was. I was completely battered emotionally. I didn't even recognize the person that was there. And the abuse was so severe in the end, remembering my name was too hard. I was just a complete mess. And it took a lot to fight back. And I think that's one of the things that abusers don't realize is that often victims are beautiful, loving, caring, giving, forgiving people, but they're also strong as hell because they've gone through this abuse and they're still standing and they're fighters. And once you kick in that fighting spirit and realize and stand up for yourself and fight back to get yourself back, you'll never be the person that you were before you walked into that relationship. You will actually be a stronger person for it, hopefully. You come out jaded, a little bit untrusting, or a lot. We don't trust. We overanalyze. well, I'm saying we, but I definitely know that I was. And then the pendulum will swing, and eventually you'll end up being a stronger version of yourself, somebody who, if you learn from it and you can understand it, why you went through it. And I'm not talking about childhood abuse, because I think that's something completely different. But if you can understand why this happened and that you will never let it happen again, how you can avoid it, then your future will be much better. Just for our own health, we need to look at the relationships we're in.
I agree. Well, and again, if people want to check out your presentation, just look at the links on the website and we'll have that all updated. But Kathy, thank you for coming on again. It's been a pleasure.
It has, as always.
As always. I love it. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. You have a great day.
You too. Many thanks to Kathy for sharing her personal struggles and insights with us. I'm going to be taking the next 2 weeks off to spend time with family and friends for the holidays. I hope and pray you have a happy and safe holiday season as well. I will be back the second week in January with a personal story submitted by Haley. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.